Okay, picture this. You're standing on the threshold of your massive new dream home. The price? An absolute steal. But there's a catch. The address? House 666. Now, as the mother in our story put it, they say 666 is the devil's number, and nothing associated with it is auspicious. But her husband? He brushed it off. Because hey, logic and a fat stack of financial savings usually went out, right? Well, as we're about to see, sometimes a bargain real estate deal is actually just deadly bait. Welcome to today's explainer, Anatomy of a Haunting. We're going to break down the House 666 case and track exactly how this family's dream turned into an absolute nightmare. So, what really happens when a family's dream home turns out to be a literal gateway for a demonic resurrection? That's the wild mystery we're unraveling today. We've got a father, Nitesh, his wife Soni, and their 3 kids. They finally achieved this lifelong dream of ditching the rentals and moving into a huge home in the Apurva society. And I mean, in this economy, who passes up a massive discount? Nobody. But it turns out this piece of suburban real estate was totally weaponized by a desperate man's grief. The walls of their new house were hiding a 15-year-old nightmare. Right from the jump, we get this classic clash, modern skepticism bumping right up against traditional intuition. On one hand, you have Nitesh. He's a completely logical guy. The builder hands him the keys to House 666 and practically sprints away. But Nitesh, he's just thrilled about the cash he saved. He waves off the creepy number as silly superstition. But then there's Soni. She is deeply intuitive and instantly feels that something is incredibly wrong. She's like, look, nothing good can come from that number. But Nitesh shuts her down completely. He tells her she's just going to scare the kids. And honestly, that right there, that dismissal creates a massive, fatal blind spot for the whole family. Because of that blind spot, they completely miss what we call the infection point. Now, before the total chaos kicks in, we've got to isolate this exact moment. It's that critical split second where a supernatural entity breaches our physical world and binds to a human host. And for their eldest daughter, Astha, this breach didn't take weeks to build up. Nope. It happened on their very first night, literally just hours after unpacking boxes. Let's break down exactly how this went down step by step. So Asta is lying in her new bed in the dark, and suddenly she feels this icy breath on her neck. Then, rough hands touching her. She looks over at her vanity mirror, lit up just by the moonlight, and sees an absolute nightmare staring back. Panicked, she grabs the first thing she can find, a TV remote, and hurls it, shattering the glass. And just like that, the trap is sprung. A dark shadow pours out of the broken mirror and violently forces its way into her body. The entity actually used sheer terror to trick Asta into breaking that mirror. It was, quite literally, a gateway. And just to give you an idea of the absolute terror she was facing, think about what was looking back at her from that glass. A face severely burned, with live worms falling from her mouth. A horribly disfigured nun. Just imagine waking up to that in your brand new, unfamiliar bedroom. That level of traumatic shock, that was the catalyst. It completely paralyzed her mental defenses, making it a walk in the park for that shadow to hijack her physical form. Now you might think things like this take time to ramp up, right? Actually, scratch that. It escalates with terrifying speed. We're talking subtle behavioral changes to severe physical violence in under 24 hours. Night 1, the possession happens. The very next morning at breakfast, Atha, who is a notoriously picky eater, sits down and aggressively devours a plate of eggs. Now her family knows she despises eggs, won't even sit near them. Then by that evening, things get violent. Soni walks into her daughter's room and literally drops her coffee cup in shock. Atha is brutally slamming her own head against the wall. Her forehead is torn open, and there is blood everywhere. It's like this thing completely overwrote Asta's physical and psychological hard drive. Her diet completely flips. Her whole demeanor shifts from a timid teenager on antidepressants to someone flashing these deeply unsettling, creepy smiles at blank walls. And her physical strength? She goes from a normal kid to someone with the unnatural power to bash her own skull into concrete. I mean, these are massive, screaming red flags. But her family, they just can't connect the dots. Why couldn't they see it? Well, it all goes right back to Nitesh. His excuse for all of this? He actually says, it's just those antidepressants she's been taking since Varun's wedding. I mean, his daughter's forehead is split to the bone. She's a completely different person. But Nitesh is so deep in financial denial, so stubbornly tethered to logic, that it almost costs Asta her life. He outright refuses to sell the house because he just dumped his life savings into it. Instead, he leans hard on modern medicine, rushing her to the hospital, completely blind to the supernatural nightmare unfolding right in front of him. But here's the thing about supernatural infections. Doctors can't cure them. Asa comes back home a few days later, totally silent, but harboring this dark, heavy energy. She locks herself in her room, and the burned, worm-infested nun appears in the mirror again. The entity tells her, "Tonight is your last night. Tonight, everything ends and a new beginning starts," which sets the stage for our climax and leaves us with one incredibly terrifying question. In the dead of night, where exactly was Azda Doint? The answer to that is absolutely chilling. She navigates deep into the house, heading straight for a locked, dusty room that hasn't been touched in years. And how does she get in? She just intuitively grabs the key from a specific drawer, like she's lived there her entire life. Once inside, she shoves aside a heavy wooden chest to reveal a hidden trapdoor. She climbs down beneath the floorboards into a massive basement, lit up by exactly 100 burning candles. She bypasses all these hidden obstacles in pitch darkness with total precision. The entity inside her knew exactly where it was going, and more importantly, it knew exactly who it was going to meet. Down in that hidden basement, the whole terrifying trap is finally laid bare. There's a robed figure sitting at a satanic altar next to a blazing fire pit. He commands her, "Come here, bow before our devil, and complete my ritual today." Atha, who's blindfolded and totally compliant now, just lays herself down on the altar. The jaws of the trap snap shut. But thankfully, remember Sony's maternal intuition, the same gut feeling Nitesh ignored on day one? Well, it wakes her up upstairs. She's drenched in sweat, utterly panicked, and she just knows her daughter is in mortal danger. What happens next is just this chaotic, incredibly narrow escape. Sony practically drags Nitesh out of bed to search the house. They spot the open trapdoor and sprint downstairs right as this robed figure raises a massive knife over Asa. Nitesh and his son Arnav literally tackle the guy to the ground, but the figure just laughs and warns them that only he can free Asta from the spirit. But then, out of nowhere, the younger daughter Riddhi rushes in with a tantric baba. This guy immediately takes control. He sprinkles holy water and slaps sacred ash, babudi, onto Asta's forehead, instantly snapping the entity's hold on her. They pulled it off. The rescue is a success. But the absolute biggest shock of the night? That comes when they pull the mask off the cultist. Okay, brace yourself for this realization because that incredible financial bargain they got, it was deadly bait. The cultist wasn't some random intruder. It was the builder. The very same guy who rushed off after handing them the keys on day one. Only he wasn't a builder at all. He actually owned the house. He intentionally sold House 666 at a jaw-dropping, irresistible discount for one specific reason: to lure in a vulnerable family. He needed a sacrifice. And Letitia's desperation for a cheap dream home practically hand-delivered the perfect victims. 15. That is exactly how many years this guy spent hunting for a human sacrifice for Satan. For a decade and a half, he squatted in that house, just waiting, trying to sell it off. Mostly, buyers got spooked by the 666 address, or they felt the bad vibes and bailed. But Nietzsche's family? They stayed for the savings, and they walked right into a 15-year-old trap. So why go through all this? Well, the tragedy behind his completely warped motive is that his beloved sister, who was actually a devout nun at a nearby church, died super young from a terrible disease. She was literally his only family. His twisted solution? Feeling totally abandoned by the very God his sister worshipped, he pivoted his devotions straight to Satan. He had actually preserved his sister's corpse down in that basement. So that burned nun Asta saw in the mirror, yeah, that was the demonic manifestation of his sister's corrupted spirit. His sheer, unadulterated grief drove him to orchestrate this 15-year nightmare, all just to bring her back to life. The cops finally showed up and arrested the guy. And Nitesh's family? Yeah, they unsurprisingly abandoned that house immediately. Today, the fake builder is locked away in a mental asylum. But his mind? It is still violently fixated on one singular goal: finding the next sacrifice to resurrect his sister. The physical threat might be locked behind bars, but you better believe his supernatural intentions are very much alive, just waiting in the dark for the right moment and the right victim. Which wraps up today's explainer. We went from a sweet discount on a dream house straight to a demonic altar. It's a lot to process, but I'll leave you with this final chilling thought.
The next time you stumble on a real estate deal that seems just a little too good to be true, ask yourself, who's really paying the price? Keep that in mind before you sign your next lease. Stay curious, stay observant, and please, always trust your gut.